I'm Lena Carroll, 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one holding my family together. Last summer at my sister's birthday dinner in a crowded Italian restaurant, I passed her a sealed envelope across the table, thinking maybe this time things would be different. It held a promise, 6 months of rent paid in full, a gesture I hoped would finally mend what had never healed. She opened it, looked at me like I was a joke, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "You think this makes us even?" They all laughed, my mother, cousins. Even my aunt and I knew then that something inside me had shifted for good. Before we go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever tried to fix something with love and it still wasn't enough. I grew up right here in Idaho, raised by my mom in a small rental off State Street. We didn't have much, but I was taught to share whatever we had. My mom used to say that family sticks together no matter what, and I believe that with my whole heart. When I was old enough to work, I took every shift I could get so my sister could stay in school, or so my mom wouldn't fall behind on bills. I paid for more than I probably should have. And for a long time I told myself it was just what you do when you're the strong one in the family. I started a freelance design business when I was 25, working from home and slowly building a name for myself. Clients came in waves, but I managed to stay afloat. I wasn't wealthy, not even close, but compared to my sister, who hadn't held a job in 2 years, or my mom, who constantly bounced between temp work and missed payments, I might as well have been made of gold. They never said it outright, but I felt it every time they called, needing just a little help until Friday. What hurt the most wasn't the money, it was the way they treated my help. Like a given, like it was expected, not earned. When I was 18, I spent weeks saving up to buy Holly a scarf for her birthday. It was a deep red pattern that reminded me of something she used to wear in high school. She opened it, barely looked at it, and called it something she'd find in a thrift store bin. That moment passed, but the bitterness didn't. She brought it up for years, like it proved something about me, like I'd failed some invisible test. And ever since then, every check, every gift, every rescue was a way to make up for that one wrong move. So when I sat across from her last July, watching her tear open that envelope with $6,000 inside, I wasn't just trying to help with rent. I was still trying to be forgiven for that scarf. I thought maybe it would mean something to her. Maybe it would close the gap that had never stopped widening. But the way she looked at me that night, the way she laughed along with the others, it hit me somewhere I didn't expect. And I think that's why my hand moved on its own when I reached across the table and took the envelope back. The room went quiet fast, forks halfway to mouths. My mother's voice came sharp and low. "Lena, don't do this. You're making a scene." But my hands were already shaking and my heart was pounding in my ears, and something inside me said no more. I didn't know then how far that choice would ripple or how hard they'd fight to pull me back. But as I stood up from that table, I realized for the first time I wasn't afraid of walking away. I stood outside the restaurant long after the laughter had died down, the summer air thick with car exhaust and the buzz of a patio crowd nearby. My hands were still trembling. I could hear the sound of my own footsteps as I crossed the parking lot back to my car. I sat behind the wheel, keys in my lap, trying to catch my breath. Somewhere inside, my mother's voice was still rising, calling my name. I didn't go back. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about the envelope, the smirk on Holly's face, the sharpness in her voice, all over a scarf. A birthday scarf from when I was 18, working after school at a smoothie shop, trying to find something thoughtful with $25 to my name. I remembered how I had stood in the store for half an hour picking through colors and patterns, finally settling on a bright red one with a little shimmer in the thread. I'd thought it was her style, but when she opened it that year, she held it up like it smelled bad and laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. Said it looked like it came from the clearance bin at a thrift store. I'd apologized right then, face flushed, but it didn't matter. That scarf got brought up every holiday, every argument, every time she wanted something. Over the years, she found a way to turn it into a debt I could never repay. When she blew through her rent, she'd text me a picture of the scarf. When she got her car towed, she'd bring it up again. "You still trying to make up for that gift," she'd joke, but the money always came after. I paid it. I always paid it. I thought the $6,000 would be different. I thought maybe if I offered something that big, it would mean I could stop owing them. But that envelope didn't change anything. It just gave them another reason to laugh. The texts started the next morning. First from Holly. Short and sharp. "You're seriously cutting me off." "Wow." Then a longer one. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You owe me for that." I didn't answer. By lunchtime, my mom chimed in. "Lena, this is not the way we solve problems. You need to come talk to us." An hour later, your sister's crying. "I hope you're happy." Then came the guilt. After everything we've done for you. After all we've sacrificed. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and left it there. That afternoon, Holly sent another message this time with a link to a handbag. The caption just read, "This would help." The price tag was over $200. She didn't ask. She didn't say please. Just dropped the link and waited. I opened my banking app. My balance wasn't terrible, but it wasn't endless either. I sent her $1 and typed, "Enough for now." Then I hit send. It took less than 10 minutes for my phone to ring. I didn't even have to look to know it was my mom. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again, then a third time. On the fourth try, I picked up. Her voice was already tight. "Lena, what's going on with you? Your sister said you sent her $1. $1 I told you I'm not doing this anymore," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm not a bank." She went quiet. Just for a second. Then I heard her breath catch. "You're tearing this family apart." I hung up. The calls didn't stop. Holly started leaving voicemails. The first few were casual. "Let's talk like grown-ups," she said. "You know you overreacted." Then they turned. "You're a selfish brat. Always have been." My mom's messages were longer. Some were full of guilt. Others were full of blame. One of them just said, "Your father would be ashamed of you." My father had been gone nearly 10 years. He'd left a quiet hole in our lives that no one ever really spoke about. Until now. I stopped listening to the messages. I didn't delete them, just left them there, stacked like old newspapers I couldn't bring myself to throw out. I tried to work, but every time my phone lit up, my focus shattered. By the weekend, I was worn thin. That's when Nate called and asked if I wanted to come to his parents' place for a backyard barbecue. I hesitated. I almost said no. But I needed air, and his voice felt like a lifeline. I said yes. His parents lived across town in a quiet neighborhood with broad lawns and hanging flower baskets. The kind of place where the mailboxes still had little red flags, and the neighbors waved when you parked. I stood at the gate for a moment before walking in. The smell of grilled corn and sweet barbecue sauce drifted through the air. Nate's dad, Tom, was manning the grill, flipping burgers with a wide metal spatula. His mom was laying out a tray of deviled eggs. I hadn't even said hello before she smiled and waved me over. "Lena, come grab a plate. Don't be shy." I wasn't used to that, being wanted in a room just for showing up. Nate stayed close, handing me a lemonade and steering me toward the folding chairs under the big maple tree. That's where I met Ruby, his younger sister. She had paint smudged on her shorts and her hair up in a loose bun. She sat beside me barefoot in the grass, and after a while she leaned in and said, "Zach told me what happened. With your family." I tensed a little, but she didn't say more than that. Just added, "They don't get to treat you like that, not if they can't see what you're worth." Then she grinned and nudged my elbow. "Also, your portfolio is awesome." I didn't know what to say, so I smiled. We sat like that for a while, watching Tom argue with Nate over how often to flip a burger. Ruby passed me a paper plate with 2 slices of watermelon and asked if I liked to sketch on paper or digital better. She didn't ask about Holly, or Diane, or money. She just asked about me. That night, when Nate dropped me off, the sun was dipping low over the horizon, and the sky had turned that soft blue you only get in late August. He walked me to my door and kissed my cheek. "You looked more like yourself today," he said. I nodded. I felt it too, just a little. Back inside, I saw the missed calls on my phone. 3 from Holly, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't open any of them. I sat down at my desk, opened a blank file, and stared at it for a long time. The scarf, the envelope, the laughter. I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do next, but for the first time in years, I felt like I might not have to keep paying for a mistake I made at 18. The silence that followed the weekend barbecue felt like stepping into a room after the music's been shut off, still but full of echoes. I went back to my work, tried to focus on deadlines and client emails, but every time I opened my inbox, I half expected to see my mom's name. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened just a little. Even though I hadn't responded to Holly's last round of messages, she didn't stop. Some were clipped angry, others were oddly upbeat, like nothing had happened. One afternoon, she left a voicemail saying, "We're still sisters, right? Families fight. Just send what you can." By Wednesday, she started bringing up old stories again. Times I'd let her down when I was too busy to help her move or didn't lend her money fast enough. It always circled back to that same red scarf. I couldn't believe she was still using that, like it was some kind of permanent stain on my record. 10 years, and it was still the thing she pulled out whenever she wanted to remind me what I owed. My mom's tone was different, softer, but laced with something heavier. "Lena," one voicemail began, "You know I don't like asking, but Holly's in a tight spot. Her phone bill's overdue and she can't afford groceries this week." Then the follow-up almost whispered, "It wouldn't take much, just enough to get her through." I didn't respond. I kept my phone on silent. But each message, each missed call sat there like a stone in my pocket. I carried them from room to room, even when I wasn't listening. They never left. That Friday, I went out to dinner with Nate, a small Mexican place on the edge of downtown, all string lights and mismatched chairs. We sat near the window, our hands brushing under the table, while we waited for our order. He asked how work was going. I gave a quick update, then fell quiet. "You've been somewhere else all week," he said gently. I nodded, not sure how to explain the kind of quiet that fills your head when people you love treat your silence like a dare. I didn't need to say much, though. Nate reached across the table and gave my hand a light squeeze. "You're not wrong for drawing a line," he said. Back at my apartment that night, I scrolled through my old sketches. I'd saved some from years ago, project ideas that never got off the ground, pieces I didn't finish. I found one I'd drawn in my first year freelancing, a mural idea for a local bus shelter. Bright colors, layered shapes. I remembered how excited I'd been about it before life got in the way. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the peephole and saw my mom standing there, coat pulled tight around her shoulders. I opened the door slowly. "Hi," she said, like we hadn't gone weeks without speaking. I stepped aside and she walked in like she had every right to be there. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. "Lena," she started. "We're behind on the house. The bank's calling. I'm short $7,000. I didn't speak. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "I wouldn't ask if I had another way. You're the only one doing well right now." I stayed standing. "I told you last time I'm not doing this anymore." Diane's expression shifted. "So you're just going to let us lose everything?" "This is our home." I didn't say anything. I could feel the pressure building behind my chest, but I kept still. She went on. "Holly's struggling. We both are. We're family. Lena. That used to mean something." I took a breath. "It still does. But it doesn't mean I have to keep solving every problem you create." Her voice dropped. "After everything we've done for you." I didn't let her finish. "You need to leave." She didn't argue, just stood slowly and walked to the door. Before she stepped out, she said, "You'll regret this one day." Then she left. I sat down listening to the soft click of the door closing. My hands were cold. I didn't move for a while. An hour later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Holly. She didn't wait for me to say anything before stepping inside. "You really did it," she said, arms crossed. "You're letting Mom lose the house." I stood still, arms at my sides. "You've got money for design software and cute shoes, but not for your own mother. I'm not paying," I said. "You both need to take care of yourselves." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Wow. Just because you have a job now, you think you're above us." I didn't answer. "You think you're better because you gave me that ugly scarf, and now you're throwing around dollars like it means something." The mention of the scarf didn't sting the way it used to. "You're 31, I said. "Grow up." Holly's mouth tightened. "You're going to end up alone. No one wants someone as cold as you." I opened my phone, tapped into my bank app, and sent her $2. I typed, "Time to grow up." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and stared at the screen. $2. "It's more than you've earned," I said quietly. Her face flushed. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough that the frame rattled. I sat back down, breathing slowly. The apartment was quiet again. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about finally saying no and meaning it. A few days after Holly slammed the door behind her, I got a text from Ruby. It was short. Just said, "Are you home with a little paint palette emoji?" I replied yes, and 15 minutes later, she showed up at my door holding a rolled-up piece of paper and a small canvas tote slung over her shoulder. Her cheeks were pink from the wind, and her shoes had flecks of dried clay on them. "I made you something," she said, stepping inside. She handed me the rolled paper, her eyes bright. I unwrapped it carefully, smoothing the edges across my kitchen table. It was a drawing downtown Boise, sketched in bold lines full of color and texture, but in the middle of the street was a figure. Me, standing with a satchel across my shoulder, framed by golden light. It wasn't perfect or polished, but it felt alive. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at it. Ruby nudged my arm. "You always create things for everyone else," she said. "I thought maybe you should have something made just for you." I nodded, swallowing down whatever it was that caught in my throat. "Thank you," I said. It's beautiful." She grinned, pulling out a granola bar from her tote. "You're stuck with me now," she said, half joking, but the words sat warm in my chest. That weekend, Nate invited me over for dinner with his parents again. I hesitated for a moment before saying yes. I hadn't been around many people since cutting off contact with Diane and Holly. Even though I'd been firm, the quiet left behind had weight to it. Tom greeted me at the door with a one-armed hug and a stack of mail tucked under his arm. "Glad you're here," he said, motioning for me to come in. "We've got lasagna tonight, but I burned the garlic bread. Don't tell Marie." Marie, Nate, and Ruby's mom was in the kitchen setting down plates with ease. She smiled when she saw me. "Lena, perfect timing. You want tea or something stronger?" she asked, already reaching for the mugs. It was the kind of warmth that didn't need anything in return. Dinner was quiet, simple. Tom told a story about a neighborhood raccoon that kept getting into their trash, and Nate kept adding details that made Ruby roll her eyes. It felt easy, no tension hiding in the corners, no one keeping score. After we ate, Tom pulled out a notebook and asked if I had a minute. We sat on the couch while he flipped through a few pages of hand-drawn maps and elevation sketches. "This is the community park down on Baxter Avenue," he said. "They want to add a small center for local events, art workshops, public talks, that sort of thing." He turned the notebook toward me. "We've got the structure design figured out, but we need someone for the visual side mural signs, maybe a little sculpture work. Nate showed me your portfolio." I blinked. "Me," I said quietly. He nodded. "You've got a good eye. Your work has movement. Thought maybe you'd want in on this." He handed me a folder with a budget breakdown, timeline notes, and a rough concept draft. It wasn't just a favor, it was an opportunity. And they were offering it to me, not because they needed something, but because they believed in what I could do. Later, as Nate and I loaded dishes into the sink, Ruby sat nearby with a pencil and paper napkin, doodling little birds in the corner. She looked up and caught me staring. "You're going to crush it," she said like it was a fact. Nate leaned over and said, "Told you." When I got home that night, I spread Ruby's drawing and Tom's folder across my dining table. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floor under my feet. I looked down at the drawing again, me standing alone but grounded, and then at the project specs. It felt different from every other time I'd sat down to work. I wasn't fixing anything. I was building something that started with me. I picked up a pencil and started sketching. Lines turned into shapes, shapes into color blocks. A mural with pattern and rhythm, something that wrapped around the side of a building and welcomed people in. A sign at the front gate that said, "Here you belong." A few days later, Nate texted me late at night. "You seemed happy tonight," he wrote. I looked at the message for a moment, then replied, "I was." A week passed after Ruby brought the drawing, and I still had it pinned above my desk. Some days I'd glance up while sketching, tracing the golden lines she'd drawn around my figure. I didn't need the reminder, but it helped especially on mornings when the apartment felt too quiet. The community center project took over most of my days. I met with Tom twice, sometimes 3 times a week, checking measurements, walking through the old park site, talking color palettes and accessibility signage. He treated me like a collaborator, not a helper. Every time he asked what I thought, I gave an answer, and he listened. On one of those days, we stood near the back entrance of the park, looking at the crumbling brick wall that would soon hold the mural. I told him I wanted to use bold shapes, ones people could see from the street. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and handed me a folded sheet of paper. It was a city permit approval form with my name listed as the lead designer. I kept the paper folded in my jacket all the way home. That night I made soup and opened my laptop to finalize the concept draft. I was layering color into the background when a familiar number lit up on my phone. I didn't answer. The call ended after 2 rings, then a text came through. Holly. She didn't say hello, just wrote, "Don't forget Mom's birthday next week." Then a second message. "She's expecting to hear from you." I stared at the screen. The last time we spoke, she'd accused me of being cold, said I'd regret this. And now she was reminding me to send birthday wishes like nothing had changed. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, another message came in. This time, she included a screenshot of a payment reminder for an internet bill and followed it with, "Can you take care of this one just until Friday?" I opened my banking app. My balance was fine. Work was steady, and the community project didn't pay much, but it brought in some local interest. I'd had 2 new clients ask about design rates just that week. Still, I typed in a transfer for $2, just like before. Then I sent it with the same note as last time to grow up. I waited. The reply came fast. $2. Are you kidding me? Then another. You're unbelievable. I set my phone face down and turned back to my screen. The mural in progress looked like an open road now stretching wide toward a skyline that didn't exist yet. The next day, I walked over to the project site to take new measurements. A couple of volunteers were clearing leaves from the sidewalk, while Tom met with a contractor near the utility box. After we wrapped up, I lingered near the curb, sketchpad in hand, blocking out rough ideas for a welcome sign. Tom looked over and said, "You've got something brewing. I can see it." I smiled. It's coming together. Later that week, Ruby stopped by again, this time carrying a small bundle of art supplies. "Found these on clearance," she said. "I thought they'd look good on the sculpture side of the wall." We sat at my kitchen table for an hour, trading ideas, drawing on scratch paper. She didn't ask about my mom or Holly, just asked what colors I was leaning toward, what phrases I wanted to include. It was the most comfortable silence I'd had in weeks. After she left, I sat with the project materials spread out in front of me. That night, I worked until after midnight. The final mural draft took shape in 3 layers, light rhythm movement. Nothing borrowed, nothing asked for. By morning, I'd emailed the file to the city rep for approval. 2 days later, I got a call from a neighborhood committee coordinator. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at the opening event once the mural was complete. "You're the lead on the visual design," she said. "We want people to hear from you directly." I agreed, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd say. That weekend, Nate and I went for a walk along the river. The trees were starting to lose their leaves, and we passed a few kids tossing stones near the bank. He stopped to tie his shoe and said, "You've been different lately. Lighter." I nodded. "Feels like I'm finally moving forward." We walked the rest of the way without much talking, just the soft crunch of gravel underfoot. When we reached the bench near the footbridge, we sat down and watched the water for a while. It was quiet. Not the kind that felt like waiting. The kind that felt like arrival. It was early December when the message came through. I was sitting at my kitchen table adjusting the mural plans for winter light and frost damage when I saw a name on my screen I hadn't seen in a while. Dana Perkins. She was a friend of my mother's from church, the kind of woman who brought lemon bars to potlucks and signed birthday cards with hearts over the eye. The message just said, "Thought you'd want to know. Holly lost her apartment. She's working at the diner off 6th now. Things don't look good." I sat back in my chair, eyes still on the screen. The words didn't sting the way they might have a few months ago. I read them again, then clicked my phone screen off. That evening, I walked downtown for groceries and paused near the diner Dana had mentioned. It was one of those places that stayed open, late neon sign flickering at the edges. Through the window, I saw someone moving behind the counter head down, hair tied back, reaching for plates. I didn't step closer. I just kept walking. The next morning, there was another message from Dana. This time she mentioned my mom. "Diane's been asking around for help with rent. Not sure who she's borrowing from anymore. Just thought you should be aware." I didn't reply. Later that day, I stopped by the community center site to meet with the contractor about weatherproofing the mural. Tom joined us for part of it, then stayed behind to talk with another city rep. As I walked back toward my car, a man in a beanie and windbreaker caught up to me. "Hey," he said, offering a handshake. "I'm Rick. I run that new coffee shop on State and Jefferson. Tom showed me your mural drafts. You do branding, too." I nodded, unsure where this was headed. "We're still finalizing signage, but your style's kind of what we're going for," he said. "Think you'd be open to taking it on." We exchanged emails. That night, I got the project brief in my inbox. Logo design, window art, menu layout. Not a huge budget, but real work. And they'd found me not because of my family, not through a favor, because they saw what I could do. I forwarded the file to my laptop and started sketching right away. Nate came over later, arms full of groceries and a bottle of wine. He glanced at my computer screen and smiled. "Looks like things are happening," he said, handing me a bowl of grapes. "They are," I said quietly. We sat on the floor that night, backs against the couch, my notes and thumbnails spread out across the rug. He asked questions about layout and font choices, teasing me for using words like organic texture. I laughed light in a way I hadn't felt in months. No one needed anything from me in that moment. We just were. The following week, Tom stopped by with a small box in his hand. Inside was a plaque prototype for the community center wall engraved with "Designed by Lena Carroll." I ran my fingers over the letters, tracing each one like it might disappear. "You're not just decorating the place," he said. "You're anchoring it." The words settled in slowly. That Sunday, I walked to the mural site alone. It was cold and clear sky stretched pale above the rooftops. The wall was half-primed scaffolding lined up beside it. I stood there for a long time thinking about the envelope I'd handed Holly back in July and the 10 years that came before it. None of that reached me here. Not in this space. Not in this work. By the time I got back to my apartment, there were 3 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemail. I didn't call back. Instead, I finished the final draft for the coffee shop logo and sent it in. A few hours later, the owner replied, "This is exactly what we wanted. We'd love to talk about a second location next spring." I stared at the message for a long time. That night, I wrapped Ruby's drawing in tissue paper and slipped it into a frame I'd found at the craft store. I hung it beside my desk, just above the mural sketches. Me standing in a city street surrounded by color. Nate stopped by for dinner. When he saw the frame, he smiled. "You finally put it up." "Felt like the right time," I said. He nodded, then walked into the kitchen. I heard the sound of a cabinet opening water running the click of the stove. It felt like a rhythm, one I could follow. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, and the apartment filled with the kind of quiet that didn't ache. By January, the mural at the community center was nearly complete. A few final details still needed touch-ups, some shadowing on the figures, a layer of sealant for the back wall, but most of it was up. People walking past would pause and take photos. One afternoon, I watched a woman point something out to her son and trace her finger through the painted lines like she knew exactly where they led. Tom called to check in about the opening event, which was set for early spring. I'd been asked to speak briefly, nothing formal, just a few words about the design and the message behind it. I hadn't written anything down yet, but I knew what I wanted to say. One morning I was sketching signage variations for the second coffee shop project when Dana Perkins called again. I hadn't heard from her in a while. I picked up. She spoke gently. "I don't want to upset you, but I thought you should know your mom's been asking around again. Apparently she tried to take out a personal loan last week and was turned down." "I didn't say anything at first," Dana went on. "She's asking neighbors, church friends. No one's biting this time. It's getting hard for her." I thanked her for calling and ended the conversation. I stood in my kitchen for a long time afterward, my phone still in my hand. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel much of anything. A few days later, I saw Holly, not on purpose. I was running an errand near downtown and stopped to grab coffee before heading home. The diner windows were fogged from the cold, but I recognized her behind the counter. She looked tired, hair pulled back in a loose bun, moving from table to table with practiced rhythm. A part of me paused, wondering if I should go in. But I didn't. Back home, my inbox held another client inquiry. A local florist wanted help rebranding their signage and social media banners before Valentine's Day. They mentioned seeing my work on the mural, and a barista had passed along my name. I opened a fresh draft and started writing back. The next morning, I found a voicemail from a blocked number. It was Diane. She sounded strained. "Lena, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I don't know where else to turn. I've tried everything. I need help." Her voice faltered, but there was no apology, no change in tone, just the familiar weight of expectation tucked beneath the pleading. I didn't call her back. That weekend, I visited Nate's family again for dinner. Ruby had set the table with mismatched candles and brought out a small chocolate cake she'd made from scratch. Tom asked about my new projects, and Marie offered to pass along my portfolio to her friend, who ran a quilting store looking to update her website. The conversation moved easily, laughter filling the corners of the room like it belonged there. At one point, Ruby pulled me aside and said, "You seem lighter lately, like you're not carrying so much." I didn't answer right away. I just nodded. The next day, I walked through the mural site alone. The colors were vibrant even under the gray sky. I ran my hand along the edge of the wall and stepped back to take it all in. The figures I'd painted weren't real people, but they felt familiar, shoulders squared, arms open, back straight. There was strength in them. A couple walked by with a stroller. The woman smiled and said, "It's beautiful. I come this way every morning just to see it." I nodded and thanked her. They didn't know who I was. That felt like enough. That night, I sat down and finished the florist's design package. I labeled the files, attached the invoice, and scheduled the final email to send in the morning. My apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the heater cycling on. The framed drawing Ruby made still hung above my desk, the same golden light encircling the figure in the center. For years, I'd chased validation from people who saw me as a resource, not a person. And now, without them, I didn't feel empty. I felt steady. The space they left behind had been filled with something better. The first signs of spring came early that year. A faint softness in the wind, the sound of meltwater sliding along the curbs, kids passing by the mural with jackets unzipped. I'd just finished sealing the last edge of the wall when Tom walked up with 2 paper cups of coffee. We stood there for a few minutes side by side, watching people stop to take photos or pause mid-step. "Hard to believe where it started," he said. I nodded, remembering the blank brick face from that first day. It wasn't just paint now. It was movement, color, space, something that stayed. Later that week, the opening ceremony came. Nate stood in the crowd with Ruby, both of them waving when I stepped forward to speak. I kept it simple, talked about shared spaces, about the stories that shape us, and the ones we choose to tell next. People clapped gently, and someone from the city took a photo of me near the plaque. It read, "Designed by Lena Carroll." When it was over, a woman I didn't recognize came up and introduced herself as a local teacher. "My students helped paint the lower half," she said. "They loved it, said it made them feel like they belonged here." I thanked her, voice catching a little, not out of sadness, just the quiet weight of being seen. That evening, Nate and I took a walk through the neighborhood. The sky was soft with early dusk, the kind that turns everything pale gold. He reached for my hand as we passed the mural one last time. "You built something real," he said. Back at the apartment, I curled up near my desk and opened the last invoice for the florist's project. I scanned through the numbers, clicked send, and leaned back in my chair. Across the room, Ruby's framed drawing still hung in its place. The streetlight outside cast a soft halo on the glass, the lines still sharp, still bright. I hadn't heard from my mom or sister since January. No calls, no texts, just silence. But this time, it didn't feel like something missing. It felt like distance that had finally found its shape. For years, I thought love meant staying in the fire until someone else decided you could leave. I thought family meant saying yes, even when it cost you your peace. But walking away didn't make me cruel. It made me whole. There's something powerful in choosing yourself not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You stop giving pieces of yourself to people who never intended to hold them with care. And in that quiet, you begin again. If you've ever carried the weight of being the dependable one, if you've ever tried to earn love with sacrifice, I hope this story reminds you are not selfish for setting limits. You are allowed to stop reaching toward people who only take. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to know where you're listening from or who in your life helped you feel seen. I'll be here sharing more stories one step at a time.